Arab Interior Ministers' Council designates Houthi militia as a terrorist group. The UN says that the number of children killed in Yemen increases as the conflict continues. Military escalation exacerbates the suffering of displaced people nationwide. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English News with me, Shazad Dilbay. The Houthi militia escalation inside and outside Yemen has drawn multiple calls to classify the group as a terrorist organization. The resolution taken by the Arab Interior Ministers, where they approved the classification of the Houthis as a terrorist group, is a major step to increase pressure on the Houthi rebels to come to the negotiating table. This report has more details.
In a new step that aims at facilitating the solution of the Yemeni crisis, the Arab Interior Ministers' Council, affiliated to the Arab League, listed the Houthi militia as a terrorist entity. The Council approved the Houthi group inclusion in the list of terrorist entities, perpetrators, masterminds, and financiers of terrorist acts. In a statement, the Council General Secretariat said that the classification of the Houthi militia as a terrorist entity and its inclusion on the Arab blacklist comes as a result of the Houthi violations against the Yemeni population, including killing, displacement, imprisonment, and torture. The Arab ministers condemned also the group's violation against neighboring countries, including Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. The statement outlined that the inclusion of the Houthis in the Arab blacklist comes after realizing the danger of the militia and the consequences of the spread of their actions and ideas. The Ministers of Interior also called to the Arab Parliament to designate the Houthis as a terrorist group. The new Arab step aims at prosecuting the Houthi leaders in order to put maximum pressure on the group to stop its crimes as well as dry up its sources of support. It will also contribute to enhance peace opportunities and deliver humanitarian aid to those who deserve it. The Arab League move comes in line with local and international calls advocated earlier to classify the Houthi militia as a terrorist group. They referred to the crimes committed deliberately by the group on a daily basis by bombing civilian objects and vital installations with ballistic missiles and drones. These crimes, according to the organizations, are resulting in the killing and injury of civilians and at many times are amounting to be war crimes. They, in addition, pointed out that the Houthi militia has caused the deterioration of the humanitarian situation by increasing the number of displaced people in addition to the victims of mines. Recruitment of children is another aspect of terrorism that is carried out by the Houthi militia, who also pose a threat to navigation in the Red Sea.
International reports have warned that all conflicts in the world are basically targeting children. This applies to the situation in Yemen, where more than 10,000 children have been killed since 2015. This report has more details.
As violence escalates in Yemen, the number of children killed and injured increase. Following the intensification of the conflict in Yemen in 2021, violence has continued to escalate this year, and as always, children are the first and most to suffer. Over the first 2 months of 2022, 47 children were reportedly killed or maimed in several locations across the country. Since the conflict escalated in Yemen nearly 7 years ago, the UN has verified that more than 10,200 children have been killed or injured. However, the actual number is likely much higher. The conflict has caused a collapse in basic services such as healthcare and education, with millions of people displaced and 80% of the population dependent on aid. The conflict has created one of the world's worst man-made humanitarian crises, with nearly 80% of the country, or about 30 million people, in need of humanitarian assistance and protection, and more than 13 million are in danger of starvation. According to UNICEF, more than 2,500 schools are unusable, as they have been destroyed, converted for military purposes, or used to shelter the displaced. Hundreds of thousands of people have died as a direct or indirect consequences of Yemen's war, led by the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels. A report released by the UN Security Council in January said nearly 2,000 children recruited by the rebels had died on the battlefield between January 2020 and May 2021. UNICEF calls on all parties to the conflict in Yemen and those with influence over them to protect civilians wherever they are. Children's safety, their well-being, and protection must be safeguarded at all times. Violence, misery, and grief have been commonplace in Yemen, with severe consequences for millions of children and families. It is high time that a sustainable political solution is reached for people and their children to finally live in the peace they so well deserve.
A human rights seminar organized by the Yemeni Coalition for Independent Women reviewed torture and violations in Houthi prisons. Participants in the seminar emphasized the terrible practices committed by the terrorist Houthi militia against prisoners. They indicated that most of the prisoners in Houthi prisons die because of severe torture. The International Committee of the Red Cross stressed that the world must not divert its attention from the plight of Yemen. The head of the International Committee in the Red Cross delegation in Yemen, Katharina Ritz, urged the world to continue providing assistance to the poorest country in the Middle East, especially at a time when the war in Ukraine attracts the world's attention.
كانت صغيرة، كان عمري 2.5 سنين. الآن يعني هي ما زال لحد الآن يعني عمري 9 سنوات. هي تعاني الحرب، يعني دائما طلقات، دائما خوف، يعني واصل هي عايش برعب، يعني مش دار إنه مناطق أخرى يعني ما في بهمش حرب. الآن تفكيره كله إنه كله حرب، كل الدنيا حرب. أمنياتي الحالية توقيف الحرب، يعني علشان نعيش بأمان، ما يكونش في توتر. بنتي تخرج وأني آمن، أني أخرج وأني آمن، ما نش قلق.
Doctors Without Borders organization announced it will stop its operations in Ma'rib. It said this step comes after the kidnapping of 2 of its employees in Hadramaut a few days ago. The organization expressed its worry over the safety of its employees, and it added it will also withdraw its support for Ma'rib General Hospital completely. Informed sources in Al-Mahra reported that a shipment of military radio communication devices was seized while it was on its way to the Houthi militia. The sources said the security services seized a shipment of wireless communication devices at the port coming from the neighboring Oman. Masan Project for Demining announced it removed 1,352 mines and explosive devices during the last week. The project said the total removed mines since it started reached more than 322,000 mines and explosive devices. The terrorist Houthi militia continues to forcibly displace citizens from their homes and turn them into military camps. Local sources confirmed that the rebels forced more than 90 families, including hundreds of people, from their homes west of Al-Jarahi district in Hudaydah. The sources stated that after the forced displacement, the militia brought in vehicles loaded with mines and explosive devices and planted them in the neighborhoods and lands of citizens in the 2 villages. Since violence broke out in Yemen late March 2015, conditions in Yemen have worsened. One major humanitarian crisis is the displacement. Innocent civilians flee their homes to avoid being killed in conflicts. This report has more details.
Displacement became a ghost haunting each family in Yemen due to the ongoing conflict, and reports monitor exacerbation in numbers of displaced during the month of February. From the 1st of January to 19th of February, IOM Yemen DTM estimates that 3,368 households have experienced displacement at least once. Between 13th and 19th of February, 1,212 individuals lost their homes. The majority of people have left their houses in Ma'rib, Al-Hudaydah, and Al-Dala. UN is warning that further escalation of the conflict will only increase the vulnerability of people in Ma'rib, especially those displaced, and it's calling for an immediate ceasefire in Yemen. The organization also stated that only a peaceful resolution to the conflict can halt further suffering. According to the UN, new displacement is exacerbating the existing humanitarian needs, drastically increasing the need for shelter, essential household items, water and sanitation, education, and protection services, particularly for children. The war is forcing more and more people to leave their homes in search of safety, as UN Deputy Representative in Yemen said, as individuals flee from Houthis violence and sometimes they are forcibly displaced due to looting and confiscation. A report prepared by the Task Force on Population Movement said that a significant number of those displaced are attempting to return home. However, they stand chained due to the remaining violent moments and lack of lull moments and perceived improvements in the conflict. The ongoing conflict didn't only force people to leave their homes, but also it let some people leave the whole country to escape the hell of the Houthi war. Recent years have witnessed an escalation in the forced migration of young people towards neighboring countries, and death in the cold forests kidnapped many Yemeni immigrants to Europe. The war has converted primitive needs to huge dreams, as Yemeni citizens' only wish is to stay safe at their houses with basic human needs.
Coming next, in Lash House of Brides or Dar al-Arais is an old cultural heritage site under threat of destruction.
راتب الواحد 120 ألف والكيس الدقيق ب18 ألف والكيس السكر اليوم ب20 ألف. كم يعني بيعطي هذا الراتب كامل كيس سكر وكيس دقيق؟
المواطن اليمني يعيش في أزمة إنسانية وغذائية مؤلمة من غلاء الأسعار وفحشة الأسعار وغلاء الصرف والعملة الأجنبية في البلد.
حالتي الحين حالة لما ندي احنا شلقيرة ما نقدرش ناكل الأكل داخل ما احنا بحاجة صعبة.
Welcome back. The Judicial Authority in Taz announced a total strike. The announced strike comes after accusing military and security leaders of attacking the headquarters of the Judicial Authority inside Taz. A judicial source outlined that the concerned authorities failed to implement the orders of the judges after an assault on the judicial complex in Taz. A German foundation said that the Houthi militia funds their supporters mainly from taxes and fees. The foundation's report confirmed that the Houthi militia imposed a new tax of 20% on some businesses. According to the foundation, import and export license are granted only to Houthi supporters to finance its operations. Fishermen in Yemen are suffering as waterways have been a target of the warring parties. Yet they keep fishing to make a living and support their families. They have been bombed several times and their boats were completely destroyed. This report has more details.
The Yemeni fishermen are risking everything they have just to be able to feed their families. Catching fish for a living in Yemen isn't only about jumping into a boat and throwing a net into the sea. You need to also say goodbye to your family and prepare them for the fact that they might never see you again. What was once a fairly routine occupation has become a matter of life and death since war started in 2014. This has little to do with storms or treacherous currents at sea, but rather the fact that after the Houthi militia declared most of Yemen's territorial waters to a conflict zone, fishermen have frequently been fired upon and killed when attempting to work there. According to statistics from Yemen's Fisheries Authority, as of August 2019, at least 334 fishermen had been reported killed or injured since 2015. Others have been arrested and had their boats seized, while some were now detained in Houthi prisons in Yemen. A Yemeni fisherman from the city of Aden called Ahmed Futayh stated that fishermen in Yemen are only allowed to fish in specific areas near to the beach. But when they try to fish in deeper areas where there are a lot of fish, helicopters chase them, the fighters shoot at them and seize their boats. Local reports estimate that of Yemen's 100,000 fishermen, over a third, which is about 37,000, have quit since the war began and lost their income. This is one of the world's poorest countries, where the war has resulted in tens of thousands of people living in famine-like conditions, and which has been declared by the United Nations as the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Desperate to continue earning a living and feeding their family, many fishermen decided not to continue in this dangerous job, and they went to look for an alternative, where they can be safe from the collision bullets. However, others don't have any other profession to help them provide for their family members. Hundreds of fishermen have been killed or injured at sea since the war began. Those left are forced to sail further and risk even more.
The Bridal House is one of the most important historical and touristic sites. It's located on the banks of Wadi Tuban in Lahj, and it's the icon of beauty. However, state neglect has made it under risk to be demolished. This report has more details.
Amid the absence of officials' intervention and lack of awareness of the importance of antiquities and their preservation, these antiquities remain suffering from extinction and collapse. And this is what the situation in the ancient bride's house, or what is known as Dar al-Arais in Lahj Governorate, began to be like. Dar al-Arais is exposed to negligence, as many of other landmarks and palaces that belong to the era of Abdaliyya Sultanate in Tuban Directorate. This place has witnessed the period of the last sultans in Lahj. However, today it witnesses destruction and devastation due to the digging process, which is claimed to be implemented to inspect treasury monuments, which belongs to the country of Ghasasina era.
Monuments been destroyed in Lahj Governorate, which is considered an assault on our cultural heritage. We hope local authorities preserve what is remaining of this heritage.
Dar al-Arais is considered as one of the most important landmarks in Lahj, in which the poet Commandant has praised it in one of his poems. And now it suffers lack of attention and disregard of the concerned authorities, which also threatens other Yemeni monuments, especially during the period of Houthi control.
This land we are standing on is considered as part of the greatest monuments in Yemen, and those who think that has all treasury under the land, this is a falsified concept. I'm sending my message to the local authorities to maintain this monument because it's a touristic place and thousands of people come to visit it.
The state of this place is like other monuments in Yemen, which confront devastation, and it is expected to diminish the Yemeni inheritance, unless the concerned authorities intervene and end the vandalism actions.
Here's a reminder of the main headlines. Arab Interior Ministers Council designates Houthi militia as a terrorist group. The UN says that the number of children killed in Yemen increases as the conflict continues. Military escalation exacerbates the suffering of displaced people nationwide. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.